What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Darium's Competitive Pokemon. Today's card of the day is Tapu Fini GX from the new Burning Shadows set. Tapu Fini GX is obviously a GX Pokemon with 170 hit points. You can see it is water type, it is a basic, and it has a retreat cost of 1 and no weakness, going along with the other Tapu Pokemon, those Tapu protectors. They don't have any weaknesses or any resistances, so that's pretty sweet because most water Pokemon are going to be weak to either lightning or grass, or if they're, ice type Pokemon, then they're weak to metal. But Tapu Fini's got no weaknesses, so it can give your water deck a nice little wall there that doesn't have a weakness and just an alternative kind of attacker. So that is very nice. Tapu Fini GX has 3 attacks. Let's take a look. First attack there is Aqua Ring. It says you may switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Does 20 damage for 1 colorless. So Aqua Ring, your classic kind of hit and run attack. Anybody who's been playing for a couple years can remember the infamous Donphan. Donphan had this spinning turn attack and was a whole deck, right? Because Donphan was a stage 1 fighting Pokemon and could use spinning turn, and you would spinning turn and promote these robo substitutes or Halucha or just whoever, right? That just was a wall. You could even promote Sigilyph. The Sigilyph had an ability that prevented damage from Pokemon EX. So you could use Aqua Ring, right, in some sort of deck that you kind of chip away at your opponent and promote some sort of wall. I don't think that's a super competitive strategy, personally. I don't think that it's going to be, that great. I mean, you could use it, with Alolan Ninetales, the new Alolan Ninetales, which has got that ability that prevents damage from Pokemon EX and Pokemon GX. So maybe you could, stick your opponent in a situation where all they have is EX and GX attackers, and then they have a hard time taking down your Tapu Fini because you keep using Aqua Ring. But I don't really see that as a super competitive strategy. And really, Aqua Ring's damage output is a little too low to be kind of a serious attack that you build an entire deck around. That being said, Aqua Ring is a nice little attack to have, and it is useful, just not the kind of attack you build a deck around. If you put a choice band on this thing, Aqua Ring can smack for 50, then you promote something that you don't want and that you don't mind taking damage, and that is pretty nice. The second attack is Hydro Shot, and for 2 water and a colorless, it says you may discard 2 water energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for bench Pokemon. So Hydro Shot, little sniping attack we have there. Reminds me a lot of, there was this Raikou EX a couple years back that had a similar attack. It allowed you to snipe 100 to the bench, and you had to discard, I think, all 2 or all energy attached to the Raikou. So pretty similar to that. However, Hydro Shot, discard 2 water, 120. 120 is pretty good amount of damage. You don't really hit one-hit knockouts on anything too, important with that. I mean, you could one-hit knockout an Oranguru, but you're not going to be one-shotting any Pokemon GX with that. And Shaman EX is rotated out of standard format, so, in expanded, maybe you could chip off a Shaman EX with the Hydro Shot, but in standard, you're probably not going to be knocking any GX Pokemon out in one hit. That being said, Hydro Shot does seem to pair kind of well with Ninetales GX, right? Because Ninetales DX has a snipe attack that does 50 damage, and then if you could follow it up with a Hydro Shot, right, then you could do 50 plus 120 is enough to actually knock out, a Pokemon GX with 170 hit points. So Hydro Shot, you do have to discard those 2 waters. That's kind of a rough drawback to have for an attack. However, Tapu Fini, being a water type, does have access to that recently released water patch. Or Aqua Patch, my bad, water patch. Aqua Patch, right? So you could use Aqua Patch to keep this thing powered up and keep the energy flowing to it. That being said, it's rough that you can't discard a double colorless like Ninetales GX has that attack that does 160. It says just discard 2 energy, right? So you can just discard the double colorless off of Ninetales GX, which makes that 3 energy attack much more streamable. Hydro Shot, since you do have to discard the 2 waters, that's a lot of water energy to stream to this thing. So it's going to be very difficult to pull off multiple Hydro Shot in a row. However, I think the real kind of great attack great aspect of Tapu Fini is this Tapu Storm GX attack. This attack is very interesting. It says of course, it's a GX attack, so you can only use one per game. But it says shuffle your opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it into their deck. If your opponent has no bench Pokemon, this attack does nothing. So unfortunately, you can't bench your opponent with Tapu Storm GX. However, it is a very disruptive attack. You can imagine if you're playing against a Gardevoir GX deck, and your opponent has went through all this trouble building up a Gardevoir, and then you just Tapu Storm the Gardevoir back into their deck. That's going to be very annoying for the opponent to deal with. Even if they have something on the bench, to bring up, it might not be that same attacker that they had with all that energy on it. So it's very disruptive. And then, it could be a game-ending attack, really. So you can imagine a situation where you're ending to low, right? Maybe you're going to end to 1, end to 2, right? And resources are low. Maybe you and your opponent both have one big attacker left built up, right? And maybe you just have an Oranguru on the bench or some other Tapu Lele, right? Nobody big, but you each have maybe one big attacker left. And then you could just bring up Tapu Fini and you could Tapu Storm GX, send your opponent's Pokemon, their last viable attacker, back into the deck, and then they just have to promote maybe a Tapu Lele with no energy on it, right? Or their Oranguru, and that's all they have left. So Tapu Storm GX can be a very significant GX attack if you save it for the end of the game or if you use it strategically in the middle of the game. And I think it's just, pretty useful. I think Tapu Fini GX, just for that powerful GX attack, will find its way into water-type decks. Ninetales GX finished in the top 8 of the North American International Championships last month. And, I think at least one copy of Tapu Fini GX will probably find its way into these water box style decks just because of how powerful that GX attack is, combined with the usefulness of that Aqua Ring, just being able to kind of hit and run, poke and run, just get it out of the active and promote maybe a wall like Ninetales GX, right? Nobody wants to hit into a Ninetales GX. Maybe you can Aqua Ring, promote the Ninetales GX, and then you're threatening to return the opponent's damage with Ninetales GX, with Ninetales' GX attack, if your opponent hits into it. So I think Tapu Fini goes great in water type decks, but I don't expect Tapu Fini to be the kind of Pokemon that is the main attacker in a water deck. I think Tapu Fini is kind of the card that you might play a one of in those decks. And maybe Tapu Fini is such a useful card that it can find its way into, maybe a toolbox deck where you play Marshadow, right? And then Marshadow could copy Tapu Storm GX, which I think would be super sweet, right? If you played like Rainbow Energy or, Water Energy in a Marshadow deck, something like that. So, definitely has some uses. I think Tapu Fini GX is a pretty strong card. Not incredible, but definitely useful. And I expected to see some play in something within the next, year or two. So that's it for my card of the day. Thank you all for checking it out. Let me know what you think of Tapu Fini GX in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Thank you all for checking it out. Peace.